You follow Cleopatra through a narrow passage lit by small oil lamps, each releasing the faint aroma of roasted almond and fig. The air shifts, cooler and moist, until finally you step into what feels like another world. Her nighttime garden. Not the sun-soaked promenades or formal paths of the palace gardens, no. This is something different. An enclosed space of soft moss underfoot, dark green walls of cypress and myrtle, and a ceiling open to the moon. Night-blooming jasmine coils up trellises, and somewhere unseen a fountain trickles like a whisper. Cleopatra gestures for you to sit on a low-cushioned bench beside her. Scent changes at night, she says, as if continuing a conversation from hours ago. The same rose smells different under moonlight, like it's remembering something it's not supposed to. You nod, unsure whether she's joking. Possibly both. Tonight, she explains, is for testing sleep perfumes. Mixtures meant not to seduce, impress, or command, but to ease the body into rest. You lean back, exhaling, already halfway there. She opens a cedar box and reveals half a dozen scent cones, solid perfume pyramids molded from beeswax and oils, meant to melt slowly in the heat of your skin. You remember reading about them somewhere, maybe in a dusty museum label. Ancient Egyptians often wore them on their heads during feasts. But Cleopatra's version is subtler. They're designed not to melt in the sun, but in sleep. She presses one gently into your palm. It smells of chamomile, frankincense, and something faintly like fresh rain. For overthinking, she says. You don't argue. As she lights a small lamp nearby, she shares the theory. Certain scents slow the pulse. Others steady the breath. Some, if layered right, can ease memories out of the mind without deleting them entirely. The goal, she says, is not forgetting. It's resting with your memories without them fighting back. She gives a wry smile. I rarely manage it. You sit quietly as she begins dabbing the perfumes onto thin strips of linen. One is labeled Temple Blend, used by priestesses during meditative rituals. Another is marked Papyrus Room, a scent she crafted to mimic the dusty coolness of the royal library. It smells faintly of dried ink and old laughter. And then there's a final one, sealed with green wax and no name. You raise an eyebrow. She hesitates, then uncorks it. The smell is delicate. Violets, myrrh, and something indefinable. Not floral, not herbal. Something closer to the moment before sleep itself. I wore this, she says, the first night after Caesar died. The garden stills. Even the fountain seems to hush. Historians still argue whether I grieved him, feared him, or used him, she continues softly, as if those are mutually exclusive. She rolls the vial between her fingers. Sometimes a perfume doesn't just remind you of someone. It reminds you how complicated you were around them. You sit in silence, letting the thought unfurl. Across the garden, a pair of cats chase moths beneath the pomegranate trees. One leaps, misses, lands with royal indifference. Changing the subject with practiced ease, Cleopatra picks up a scroll titled Sleep Odors of the Royal Menagerie. You peer over her shoulder and discover she once commissioned perfumes meant to mimic the fur of her favorite animals. Yes, she confirms. The leopard's was a disaster, smelled like damp leather and judgment. But the ibis's? Divine. You can't help but smile. She invites you to test one final blend. This one is light, almost not there at all. A whisper of something sweet and grassy, like hay after rain. This, she says, is the scent of surrender, of letting go. You close your eyes and suddenly the moss beneath your feet feels like a mattress. The air shifts again, cooler. You realize the scent isn't just calming, it's disarming. As if each breath releases a knot you didn't know you were carrying. Cleopatra watches you for a moment, amused. Roman generals would have wept if they knew how vulnerable they were around jasmine and linden blossom. You imagine Mark Antony, sword in hand, pausing mid-siege to ask what that delightful smell is. You don't share the image. Some jokes are better when kept to yourself. The hour deepens. The moon has climbed higher, casting silver outlines on the hedges and the half-sleeping lilies. Cleopatra tosses a final cone into a dish over a lamp. It melts with a faint hiss, releasing a scent of cedar, lime flower, and faintest mint. You ask her what it's called. She doesn't answer right away. Then, hope. But not the loud kind. The garden seems to breathe with you. As the scent of cedar and lime flower curls gently around you, Cleopatra rises and beckons you to follow her down a winding staircase, the steps worn smooth by centuries of footsteps. You descend into a cool, dimly lit cellar filled with rows of amphorae and jars, some cracked and dusty, others polished and gleaming. The air is heavy with the scent of aged wine, honey, and a hint of something metallic. This, Cleopatra says, her voice lowering conspiratorially, is where perfumes meet potions and powders. She gestures to a wide table strewn with ingredients, dried herbs, crushed minerals, animal fats rendered into soft blocks and vibrant pigments. Beauty and utility often overlapped in ancient Egypt. You watch as she picks up a small vial filled with a dark red liquid. Kohl, she explains. Not just for eyes, it was believed to protect against the evil eye and soothe inflammation. She traces a finger along the rim and smells it. Historians still argue whether it was more magical or medicinal. She pulls out a small box of crushed crocodile dung. You blink. Don't worry, she says with a grin. It was a sunscreen ingredient. Ancient sunscreen like SPF UW. You both laugh softly, the strange humor of history settling in. Cleopatra continues, describing other common additives: honey to soften the skin, frankincense for purification, and a rare resin called bdellium that smelled faintly of lemon and pine. We believed scents could influence everything, from mood to memory to fertility. You lean forward, intrigued, as she recounts a story of a perfume blend given to a bride to wear on her wedding night, designed to inspire passion and fidelity. The recipe included rose, myrrh, cinnamon, and something called spikenard, a herb so rare it was worth more than gold. Cleopatra's eyes gleam as she mentions that spikenard was rumored to have intoxicating properties, but she confesses she never tested it herself. As she talks, you notice a small, ornately carved box sitting on the table. She opens it to reveal a collection of tiny bones, beads, and amulets. These were mixed into some perfumes as talismans, charms for protection or luck. You find it fascinating how fragrance and superstition blend seamlessly here. She picks up a folded papyrus and reads aloud a passage describing a bath ritual. The bath was more than cleansing, as she says. It was an experience. Oils, perfumes, and powders combined to soothe the body and spirit. The ritual included olive oil infused with lavender and mint, sprinkled with flower petals and accompanied by soft music. You imagine sinking into such a bath after a long day, the scents mingling with warm water and quiet. Cleopatra smiles and says, Romans borrowed much of our bathing culture, but they added their own flair. She recounts how Roman baths incorporated perfumed oils, but also employed steam and massage. She remarks that historians debate how much perfume was worn after baths versus during. Some say it was the grand finale, others that scent lingered through the entire experience. You ask about the differences between Egyptian and Roman perfume preferences. Cleopatra gestures broadly. Romans liked their scents bold and complex, layers of pine, spice, and citrus. Egyptians preferred softer, floral notes, but weren't afraid to add something wild like frankincense or myrrh. You chuckle imagining Cleopatra trying to explain the subtlety of Egyptian perfume to a Roman who expected a fragrance to announce his arrival like a herald. Before you leave the cellar, Cleopatra picks up a small vial filled with a deep purple liquid. This was my favorite, a blend of violet and rose with a touch of musk. It was subtle but memorable, much like me. She winks. You realize how much more there is to ancient perfume than just pleasant smells. It's a language of power, identity, and even protection. Each drop carries stories, beliefs, and sometimes secrets meant to linger long after the wearer is gone. You step back into the warm air, the scent of violet still clinging to your fingers, ready to follow Cleopatra further on this fragrant journey. You and Cleopatra climb back up to the palace's main floor, where the sun has dipped lower, casting long shadows and bathing everything in a honeyed glow. She leads you through a grand hall filled with ornate tapestries and low tables, bearing delicate dishes and glassware. The air here smells faintly of roasted figs and freshly ground coriander, a dinner being prepared somewhere nearby. Cleopatra gestures toward a slender silver bowl filled with a thick golden paste. "This is my secret blend for the skin," she says, dipping a finger and offering you a taste. Surprising sweetness with a hint of bitter herbs, almost like honey mixed with sage. We believed that scent didn't only come from perfumes, but from the body itself. You nod slowly, savoring the unusual combination. She explains how Egyptians used scented oils not just to mask odors, but to nourish and protect the skin from the harsh sun and dust. This paste, she says, was often made from sesame oil infused with rosemary and a touch of frankincense, sometimes mixed with crushed almonds. As you listen, she recalls how Roman society prized a pale complexion, associating it with leisure and class, while Egyptians admired a golden, sun-kissed glow. The contrast made Cleopatra chuckle softly, an ancient version of today's beauty debates. Next, she pulls out a small wooden box filled with combs, pins, and hair ribbons. Hair was another canvas for scent. She picks up a delicate comb and tells you about the oils used to scent and condition hair. Jasmine, almond, and sometimes a rare resin called labdanum. Cleopatra recounts how Roman women often wore scented wreaths and even carried pomanders to keep the air around them fragrant. You ask if Cleopatra herself had a favorite hair scent. She smirks, a mix of violet and cedar with a dash of myrrh. I'd like to leave a subtle trail. The conversation shifts to daily routines. Cleopatra shares a fascinating but little-known fact. Royal women often bathed in mixtures containing milk and honey, both for their scent and their moisturizing properties. This practice was not just indulgence, but part of a carefully maintained ritual. Historians still argue whether Cleopatra actually bathed in donkey milk, or if it's just a rumor spun by Roman poets, she says with a raised eyebrow. You imagine the gentle caress of warm milk on skin, mingled with soft scents. The luxury of such a bath in a world without modern plumbing feels almost unimaginable. And yet, here you are, transported. She then describes the process of applying scented oils after bathing, a methodical ritual involving massage and meditation. Cleopatra tells you how scent was believed to influence mood, health, and even dreams. You recall the perfumes from the garden meant to ease sleep, and realize how integral fragrance was to every aspect of daily life. Cleopatra pauses by a window, watching the sunset deepen. Romans and Egyptians shared much, but they approached beauty and scent differently. Romans were louder, more ostentatious. Egyptians, subtler, more spiritual. You ask if these differences ever caused tension. She smiles knowingly. Perfume politics can be as tricky as any throne game. Before you leave the hall, Cleopatra offers you a small vial of the skin paste to take with you. For when you need a reminder that scent is more than smell, it's memory, identity, and comfort. You tuck it carefully into your bag, feeling the warm weight of history in your palm.